Good morning and welcome to our latest webinar. This morning we'll be demonstrating the changes that we've made to our 20.0 version of Jadu CMS and our 7.0 version of Jadu XFP. This morning with me is Andy Green, the Jadu XFP product owner, and Paul Johnson, our training manager and content strategist, and I'm Sarah Backhouse, our head of product. Paul, over to you.
Okay, so morning everybody. What we're going to do is take you through some of the key changes in the updates to CMS version 20 and XFP version 7. For that, we will be sharing the recording after the webinar. We have a chat panel, hopefully, that you can see to the right. So if you have any questions, if you want to drop them in the chat panel as we go through, and then we'll look at those as a Q&A at the end of the session. Okay, so Sarah's introduced us all, so we won't dwell on that. But moving on, so we're going to start by giving you a sort of update on the latest releases, sort of a high-level overview of where the control center has changed. We'll talk a little bit about what's happening with the updated online training that we have, that you are able to access. And we will also show you what the new updated documentation looks like, followed by the Q&A at the end of the session. So in terms of the latest releases, there's been a few sort of big changes in the latest version of the CMS and XFP. We've made a number of changes to the user interface. Most of these are to bring the user interface up to date in line with accessibility requirements. So the new user interface is compliant with WCAG 2.1 AA. We've also been working on making the actual interfaces more consistent across the platform, so that hopefully if you're using the platform, there isn't anything that seems too difficult and strange. If you're used to using other elements of the platform, it should be sort of consistent and logical when you're using those interfaces. So one of the main changes that we'll show you is a lot of the common tasks that are associated with different types of content that used to be sort of dotted around the screen using different buttons in different places. We've tried to consolidate them as far as possible under the actions menu. So when we have a look at the platform, you'll see that now the actions menu is really sort of where you go for most things when you're editing and updating content. There's also been substantial changes to the drag and drop type interfaces in the platform in order to make those accessible. And we've also deployed an accessible blog theme that you can use if you're deploying blogs within the CMS. Some of the other changes that are more sort of under the bonnet changes is that we've updated our Symfony 3.4 compatibility to improve security. jQuery 3 compatibility has also been updated to improve security and to help us support modern browsers more appropriately. Our deployer tool is also now available within the core CMS, and we've also launched a new version of our Meteor patch deployment tool. So I'm just going to share my screen and jump in and show you some of the key interface changes and give you a very quick tour around so you can see how things have moved around and what the experience will be like in the updated CMS going forwards. The links in the top right corner still remain. We've tried to make those more prominent, but effectively you still would go up there for accessing things like your task list, changing your password, having a look at the updated documentation, and also the details of the release notes that are published as and when we launch them. The modules are still listed down the left-hand side that you have access to. And as before, you'll only see modules listed there that you have access to as an individual user. In terms of accessibility, when you're working sort of on the modules, you will see some slight changes in terms of highlighting sort of core actions. So we can see here that the arrow to close that menu is highlighted in a slightly different color, so that it's easy to jump to and fro. And it will also show you which element you last accessed by highlighting that as well. The modules themselves remain the same in terms of the core functionality, but where you will find differences is when you actually go in to create items of content. So if I go, for example, to downloads, you'll see we've got the standard interface. I can click the new download button. So your new content buttons are now always top right, as opposed to being sort of underneath the screen, underneath the listing where they were before. So they're now far more prominent. There's a slightly cleaner interface, and the fields will highlight as you work through them. So I can go in and I can begin adding sort of categories and creating my download. Category interface is slightly different in terms of it will list everything for you in a sort of clearer view. So I can make those changes. So none of these fields in terms of process are really different. Where things change, particularly with downloads as an example, is that whereas before we would have a lot of actions at the bottom of the screen for attaching files, as I mentioned, all of those core actions now sit within the actions menu itself. So there's an avoidance of duplication of links between the actions menu and buttons on the screen. And you have one sort of key place to go to for everything. So I could go in here and select upload a file, and then the process remains the same. If I go to a different type of content, again, you'll see that the new document button is in the top right corner, so that's consistently placed. And we have that slightly clearer interface. I can work through adding my categories, my metadata. And then when I get to this point, my new page button's top right, and I also have my sort of clear actions menu here as well. The interfaces where you'll find the vast majority of changes are those where we have drag and drop functionality previously. So a good example of that would be home pages. So if I go into home pages and select to create a new home page, I can work through here. So the core process remains the same there, but as you can see, the actual homepage interface has changed considerably. So while I can still drag and drop items from the left-hand side in terms of widgets, for accessibility, you can also click on a widget and select to add it to a particular row. So if, for example, I have multiple rows and I want to add a content widget, I would select that, and I can then select which row I want to add that content widget to if I was unable to drag and drop it for some reason. When I've added the widget in, if I need to adjust the width of it, it's a slightly different process now, so I can click on my width adjuster and it brings up a nice clear tool for doing that. I can click done to save my changes. There's now a pencil icon for editing my content. And I also have the ability to expand rows sort of much more clearly than I did previously. We also have arrows for adjusting the rows, so you can reorder them. And then the clear cross button for removing widgets or removing rows as well. So you'll find wherever you had these drag and drop interfaces previously, there will be much more of a interface where you can drag and drop, or you can select the item and select the add button instead. In terms of changes to XFP, XFP remains largely the same. As a product, the user interface was changed and updated a lot more recently. So we've had less changes to make within the XFP interface. But if I show you a couple of examples, if I go into a form, you'll see now that the interface where it shows you the user journeys through the form is now color coded, so you can much more clearly see the different routes that a user can take through the form, rather than it all just being one color. So that's much clearer within the interface. And another example in here of a sort of drag and drop interface that's changed would be something like the data retention section. So whereas previously I would have, when I created a policy, the ability to drag and drop form statuses from the left-hand side, that's now changed into a simple drop-down menu that you can select from. Again, to make it easier to use in terms of accessibility. You can select multiple options in there if you need to. So on the whole, core processes remain the same within the CMS. It just is that there are a number of interface changes to hopefully make processes a lot clearer, a lot more consistent, and easier in terms of accessibility as well. In terms of online training, newer customers will be aware that we have an online training platform now that's available. So we have a number of courses on there that you can purchase and sign up to, as well as a number of free courses as well that are more geared towards devolved users within an organization. We're currently in the process of updating these with the new training material. For customers who are still using older versions of the platform, the existing training courses will still be available. So you can still go in and use those, but at the point where you update, you can either access the free updated course, or if you wanted to go through the full certification process against the new user interface, then we will have courses available that you can approach us about, and we can provide a quote for those. But the online training allows users to work through the course at their own speed. Once a user has signed up to that course, they have perpetual access to it, so they can return and review the content at any time. And for certified courses, users are also provided with a certification at the end of the course. In terms of the documentation has been updated. So as well as updating the content to reflect the new user interface and the changes that we've made, the actual documentation itself has been updated and given a much clearer look and feel, so that it's much easier to navigate and find your way around, with key bits of information pulled out and clearly highlighted within it. All of the updated documentation can be accessed through the control center. The older documentation is still available, so when you go in to select a user guide, you'll be given a choice of selecting the latest, in this case version 20 guide, or a previous guide if you want to, so that if you're still using the legacy interface. So that's a very brief overview of the changes we've made. One thing that I would like to do now is open it up and look at some of your questions. So I'm going to hand back to the team for this. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for the moment. Okay. So, okay. So Abby, is Abby still on with us? Just jumped out.
Hear me?
Hello. Hey. Yeah. So just having let's see what questions we've got.
It doesn't look like there's too many that have come through at the moment. We'll perhaps give it another couple of minutes. If anyone does have any questions, it's a great opportunity to ask the team while they're on at the moment. Okay, so John Paul has put, is it a one-off cost for a training course, or is that per user?
So with the online training courses, there's a cost for a certain number of seats. So as when we used to deliver the face-to-face training, we'd have a standard daily rate that we would charge for a certain number of users to sit in a room and have training delivered to them. We've kind of moved that model online. So when you purchase a training course, you'll be provided with a coupon for up to 10 registrations against that course that's valid for a 2-year period. So even if you don't use all of those registrations immediately, you can sort of continue to use them as and when if you have new staff joining the training as well.
Thanks a lot, John Paul, for that question. So Francesca has asked, when are these changes going live?
So in terms of the training, the changes are currently being updated. The courses are currently being updated today for you. So the updated courses will be available online from tomorrow. In terms of the platform itself and the changes there, they're available now when people are ready to upgrade. So that we've launched the new versions of the platform. So to upgrade, you'd need to contact us via support.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. See if there's any more that come through. So John has written, is there an easy way to find out which version we are on?
When you first log in to the CMS, it will show you the version number on the initial screen as you log in. So when you get your welcome message in that blue box right in the center of the screen when you log in, that will tell you which version number that you're currently on of the different products that you have.
That's brilliant. Hopefully that's helped, John.
In the control center, there's a version page linked to in the footer, and that will give you further details of versions, which is helpful if you've got any custom developments. Occasionally, they additionally have version information that needs to be kept in line with the others.
Okay, I think that's it for questions then, everyone. Oh, Darren just put, so this moves from 1, 2, 3 to this. Not sure on that one, Darren. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
After this one, so this is referring to Continuum 1, 2, 3, which is on, if you refer to our CMS blog. There we go. Let me post a link in this, hopefully. There we go. So those are our CMS release notes. 122 is version 20.00. 123 is a later version in which we have addressed CMS support tickets. We're currently waiting for an XFP release, I think. Or was the previous XFP release already happened?
That came out yesterday afternoon. So we've got a corresponding XFP release, which includes version 123 in it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Andy. Okay. Well, I think if anyone does have any more questions, we will be sending out an email after the session. So feel free to respond to that and ask any further questions, and we'll make sure that the team receive those. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you, Paul, Andy, and Sarah, for your time today. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Goodbye.